Hello and welcome, star people. This is APM, your intrepid star guide and cosmic detective, and this is another episode of the Outlaw Astrology podcast. Today's topic is going to be on how Pisces represents the final phase, where the hero must surrender individual identity to merge with the cosmic whole. Now we're going to connect this to Neptune's dissolving quality and Jupiter's expansiveness, and how the explorer archetype questions the value of complete dissolution. Rather like Virgo's cold, cool-headed discernment might edit out the beneficial because it doesn't fit the ideal, versus maintaining some healthy boundaries. So we're interested in finding strength and surrender without the escapism, which I don't have a problem with, and we're going to talk about that more. So the shadow, the Pisces, and we're also going to talk about the Pisces shadow. So trying to transcend humanness as a coping or defense strategy, and how the mystic archetype must learn to remain engaged with reality while accessing transcendent states. And so we're also going to do a little quick housekeeping. The Outlaw Astrology has a paid and free newsletter. That link will be in the show notes. We can be found on Instagram, Pinterest, and YouTube. Those links are also in the show notes. And with that said, it's time for us to move on into the topic. And so, we're going to talk about today is the cosmic waters and the dissolution of separation. Now, we're talking about Pisces, the mystic. And the insights about this will help us navigate the delicate balance between transcendence and embodiment that defines the mystic's path. And so, cosmic waters, the dissolution of separation. So what is that? So we're talking about the cosmic position of the mystic. And Pisces represents the 12th and final stage of the hero's journey, where one must surrender personal identity to merge with the universal and cosmic consciousness. So this archetype recognizes that all boundaries are ultimately temporary and illusory, and exists only to facilitate temporary existence. So if Saturn is talking about setting up all the boundaries and making and dotting all those I's and crossing all those T's and looping all those L's and etc., Neptune's right there saying, you do know that that's an illusion. You do know that it's temporary. It's only meant to facilitate a temporary experience. We're meant to transcend that, not to transcend being human, meant to transcend boundaries that were only meant to exist in the present for a short while, and were meant to be transcended. We're meant to transcend certain boundaries whilst doing our best to accept the ones that we cannot change. For example, like all life begins and ends. So, Neptune and Jupiter, we're going to talk about that cosmic give and take between the two. So, Pisces does embody both the boundless dissolution, which is Neptune, and the expansive wisdom, which is Jupiter. Now, Jupiter used to be Pisces' traditional ruler, and those who practice the traditional lineage of astrology are still using Jupiter as Pisces' ruler. So we're talking about creating a sacred space. It's where spiritual, mystical, esoteric realization emerges. And so we question not only the perceived limitations, but also the motivations behind spiritual seeking. Is this journey truly about remembering wholeness, or merely escaping reality? Now, a note about escapism. I am not against it, and I don't think anyone else should be against it too. I believe that certain escapism is necessary, meaning sometimes you need to step away, step back. Maybe you're in a toxic situation. Maybe you're tired. Maybe your mind needs to lie fallow, or your heart or your spirit or your soul needs to lie fallow for a while. It needs just to rest and to breathe, and needing some time to escape, because sometimes escape is a coping mechanism until one can get out of a toxic situation, or until one is able to find the courage to escape sometimes physically, sometimes one must leave in one's mind, one's heart, one's spirit, and one's soul. That's usually how it goes if you can't leave physically. So there are times when escapism is necessary. So I'm not against it, and I'm not suggesting anyone else be against it at all. So when we're looking at Neptune and Jupiter, Neptune dissolves, Jupiter makes things bigger. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. Now, something I should also note, the self is an illusion. And Neptunian dissolution is like, okay, I'm just dissolving the self. What self? What do we mean when we say self? What makes self? I mean, what is the self, and how do you define the self, and what makes the self up? Is a personality a self, etc.? So you're questioning whether or not a self is a thing in the first place. Now, what we have in our brains is something called a default mode network, and that is the part of our brain that manages to keep reality consistent for us, the illusion that it's consistent. And it's the part of us that remembers that we identify as this sort of person. And so when Neptune enters the picture, we are invited to drop those definitions, to question whether or not they actually are the truth to begin with. Why are they there? Who put them there? And why did we agree in the first place? Are we so certain that that's who we are in the first place? Especially if we're talking about Neptune, maybe an aspect to the sun. And your mind's going to change if Neptune is in aspect to Mercury. And those boundaries are going to get dissolved if Neptune is in aspect to Saturn. Now you're going to question the very nature of the boundaries that supported reality to begin with, and what one thinks about authority figures to begin with. And if you add Jupiter to that mix, now we're like, okay, expanding beyond our boundaries, which can be a good thing, but can also be a bad thing, meaning that it's going to have unexpected consequences and repercussions that we may not yet be aware of or able to conceptualize or even ready to deal with or face. And so we're moving on now to the ocean as metaphor. We're going to see a lot of ocean deities in this particular episode. And so water deities like Yamaya and Poseidon represent the fluidity of consciousness that dissolves rigid structures. So that would be the Neptune myth. You know, the Neptune, and by myth I'm talking about the stories, because Neptune is just another name for Poseidon. The Romans called Poseidon Neptune. Okay? So ocean energy abounding. And we've got a few. So Poseidon, otherwise known as Neptune, Roman Greek god of the sea, and embodies the Pisces duality of destructive storms and calm waters, and represents how the mystic archetype navigates emotional depths. Now, Yamaya is the goddess of the ocean, mother of all living things, and represents the Piscean nurturing, unconditionally loving aspect that embraces all beings as part of our one cosmic family. Now, here's the thing about this. When most people think about unconditional love, they automatically think of the planetary energy of Venus. Venus is not about that. Venus, I like this thing right here. I am for this and not that. Venus deletes. It's like, no, thank you. I like this over here, and that's all I'm about. Whereas Neptune is about unconditional love, as in goodwill toward others. Meaning that you don't mean people harm, and you will help when you feel called to help, which may not be all the time, okay? And so we've got Tiamat also, as this is a Mesopotamian primordial goddess of salt water, chaos, and creation, representing the Pisces connection to the primordial consciousness from which all things, all forms and all things emerge. And we have Osiris, the Egyptian god who died and was resurrected by his spouse, Isis, and bringing spiritual wisdom and agriculture, and embodies the Piscean theme of sacrifice, disillusion, and spiritual rebirth. One last one for this is Greco-Roman god of wine. That would be Dionysus Bacchus, and it's wine, ecstasy, and spiritual transformation, and represents the Pisces path of transcendence through surrender of ego. Ego would be those parts of the self that tend to do us in, whether we are paying attention or not, and also embracing divine intoxication. And so let's get down into it. So the metaphor, as I've said, is about the fluidity of mysticism. It is the dissolving of rigid structures and making ways of separating, previous ways of separating impossible maintained. So it is rather us asking whether this mysticism is us escaping or a profound recognition, awakening, as we're hoping for, because we human beings are known to deceive ourselves and tell ourselves what we most want to hear, regardless of whether or not there are red flags, orange flags, yellow flags, black flags all over the place, okay? And so let's step into the shadow of the mystic. And we're talking about escapism versus compassionate presence. And so there's a seduction, and that would be, once again, the devil card, one of the expressions of that card, of spiritual bypassing. And so spiritual bypassing is taking spiritual concepts and using them to transcend being human. So we say affirmations because we really don't want to accept or face that our partner, our caretakers, ourselves, our coworkers, and supervisors at work are just plain old people, and they're going to make mistakes, and they're going to say the wrong things, and some of those things are going to be hurtful, and padow. That's being human. We're going to have moments of being judgmental and petty and critical and hypocritical, in addition to being kind, compassionate, loving, caring. You know, it's not possible for us to live on one side of the human spectrum or living across all of it and pretending like we don't know that. Oh, I'm just over here in this nice part. That's spiritual bypassing. It ignores the fact that sometimes people say things that to them aren't hurtful but come off wrong to us, and we snap back. I'm not saying we shouldn't snap or not snap or yes snap. It's not a yay or a nay on either way. It's just pointing out the fact that we can all be petty. And we can sometimes snap to hurt other people because we're hurt. Okay? So that's just being human. And we like to use our spirituality to pretend like, oh, I can just get through, the breakup. Or I can just affirm and light candles and wear essential oils and have my crystals around me, and that'll completely take away my feelings of grief and sadness because a primary relationship that I'd counted on is suddenly gone, over, and I have to adjust. Hypothetically speaking, I have to adjust. So now I have to find ways to navigate this experience because I don't know how to do this in a way that isn't uncomfortable, because discomfort is part of this. And so affirmations about how my pain is not really pain and how it's possible that it's a wonderful gift, so I've jumped from pain to gift, and grief, loss, heartbreak is a process that we must be present for and compassionate towards. And so that's one of the examples for which when I say that, that's what I mean. And so what we're talking about here is learning to transcend. It can't be disconnected from earthly responsibility. I'm reminded of a story someone once told me about a person who was very spiritual, and they lived in some lovely, creative type of community. And they spoke of how this person who was, all about, positive thinking and optimism and hope and wonder and, high vibe and non-attachment, and would totally just walk around the earth in a way that was not particularly present. So if, for example, they wanted to wash their laundry and someone else's laundry was already in the washing machine, they would simply remove other people's laundry out of the washing machine and put theirs in there to wash without considering other people. They would take things that didn't belong to them. They would encroach on other people's boundaries far beyond what was comfortable. And no one said anything because everyone was trying to be nice. Everyone was trying to be polite and kind. They didn't want to hurt this person's feelings. So eventually when this person chooses to leave their commune for parts unknown, they are driving off and some part of their vehicle grabs hold of the lights that illuminate. And there are all these lovely little lights that are hanging from trees and from wires, illuminating things to make it look it's very lovely, quite frankly. And some part of the vehicle this unaware person is driving catches hold of the lights and pulls them all, and everything just descends in the darkness. And then off they go into the darkness, completely oblivious to the fact that they've just shorted out all the electricity, all the lights for everybody, and everybody's just descended into darkness, standing there confused, watching their taillights descending out into the darkness and onto the road to wherever they're going to. That's what I mean when I say not present, not grounded, not here. That's transcending. That's being disconnected from earthly responsibility. That means, yes, by all means, seek transcendence, but don't ignore the fact that you have a body, because there are spiritual traditions where the people who practice those traditions decide to ignore the fact that they have bodies and let their bodies not take care of them, not feed them properly, sleep them properly, get them proper health and wellness when it's needed. That's another way of ignoring earthly responsibility. Okay? And so creating a philosophy that sounds, or philosophies that sound enlightened but avoid the necessary engagement with material reality. First, you got a body. Second, that body is not going to last forever. Third, we're going to have to do things to take care of that body, feed it, sleep it, etc. And there's also bills to be paid and relationships to nurture and tend to, and etc. So ignoring reality in exchange for a beautiful vision is spiritual bypassing. And it is very seductive. And I say this advisedly as someone who actually did that kind of thing. The story I shared was not my story, but I'm going to be honest with you. Yeah, I've actually absolutely used affirmations to ignore reality, to tell a story about a relationship I hoped would continue, which was clearly over. And I told myself, I affirmed about love and how it was all going to work out, and it did not work out, okay? That's just to say that. So it is seductive to take spiritual, mystical technologies and use them to try to transcend, get over, get through, get around reality and life as it actually is lived, we're actually living it. So spiritual movements can collapse, and they do collapse when they sacrifice practical compassion for abstract oneness. And I can point to any number of cults. People's Temple, Nexium, etc., where the very idea was to help people, whether it was to create equality in a status quo that didn't honor all voices, it only honored one type of voice, or, like as in the People's Temple, or when it comes to Nexium, where people just wanted to be part of something bigger. And most cults take advantage of the fact that people want to be part of something bigger. And so that part of something bigger, it became a great idea that completely collapsed when one person decided that their needs, and that's, like I said, we reach back to Saturnine authority, but also if you think of Neptune and Jupiter in aspect to one another, or just the archetype of the two energies, you've got one side that's dissolving the ego and the other side that's huge. So if they're going to be fantasies created, they're going to be huge fantasies, ungrounded. I mean, Jupiter energy can take any planet and make it huge. So, Moon, Jupiter, that's all the feelings. Neptune, all the illusions. It's for good or for ill. Now, technically, no planet, no point is bad or good. It's only how it is used. So when we're looking at sacrificing compassion for abstract oneness, first of all, the oneness is not even defined, so we don't all know what it actually is. We're just using our own personal definition of what it is without actually asking anybody that we're in relationship to who might also be in this particular spiritual movement, what they define oneness as. How do they understand this teacher's oneness? What's their experience of it? If we don't talk about it, we don't ask, we're going to assume, and this is never a good idea. And that's how it all collapses, because we all assume we're working toward the same thing. What is oneness? What is unity? Why is it important? Why is it good? And let's nail that down. What does that mean? And so, like I said, most cults, from the People's Temple to oh darn it, my brain is just, it loves to do this sort of thing. So Nexium to Nexium, and to all points in between all of that. We can all name a cult that started out with the intention of oneness, of unity, of equality, of creating a better world, a very fantastic utopian world. It is selling utopia. Like, for example, and the name escapes me, but there was a cult that told its members that they were going to go to another planet. And then when one of the founders of the movement passed, they had to make up a story about we're all supposed to transcend in our physical bodies, and this person transcended in a non-physical form. We got to explain that. And I can't remember the exact name of that particular cult. But all of them preach oneness, unity, and the practical application of being kind to individual failings, and the fact that most people are not superheroes, not gods or deities, just plain old people trying to muddle through and make it through, can make this challenge. So I'm not going to provide easy answers. I don't do that. I don't think anybody should. But we will move on to another challenge here. It's called the drowning mystic, and that is the shadow of Pisces that manifests itself in losing itself completely in cosmic waters, and also sometimes idealizing people and idealizing movements, ideas, etc. And it creates dreamers who constantly seek altered states but never integrate their visions. And I have a story, hypothetically. A challenged individual, as we all are, trying to make it in a marriage, and that's not working, and everything's just not flowing. And they discover ayahuasca. And ayahuasca opens their mind. And they're like, wow, this is just totally just opened my mind. Things are going to be different. But then they go back to their life, and their marriage is still their marriage. Their partner is still their partner. The job is still the job. The co-worker is still the co-workers. And so they get back to real life, and they don't know how to integrate the ayahuasca wisdom into their life. And so what results is them, at the start of the journey again, and they're like, wow, I'm going to have an ayahuasca experience. It's going to really open my mind. And once, and this is a documentary, and once you watch this person talk, or a potential documentary, but anyway, hypothetically speaking, this lovely soul, you find out, goes back and back and back and back and back. And it's like, okay, this is not their first time doing ayahuasca. It's been half a dozen times doing ayahuasca. And that's when you start to realize that the ayahuasca is no longer providing sobering truth and sobering wisdom to reality. It is an escape now. I don't like my life, and I don't know how to fix it, and I don't know how to integrate what I'm learning from my ayahuasca experiences, so I just keep going back to the well, going back to the well, going back to the well, because I'm seeking altered states, and I don't know how to integrate the wisdom of that. So I just keep going back and back. Meanwhile, everybody else in my life is like, oh, are they going again? I don't see any changes. Are you seeing changes? I mean, we still have a marriage. We still have a job. We still have a business to run. We still got life to do. We can't keep, you can't keep running off. We can't run off with you. We'd love to. We can't. You understand? So basically, that would be an example of someone seeking an altered state, but not integrating the information. The altered state itself is being sought rather than the result of it, which is opening one's mind to see past illusion, which will ground one in reality. And so I'm thinking of Dionysus and Bacchus, mostly Dionysus. And this is the Greek Roman god that embodied ecstatic liberation and the dangers of permanent intoxication, that show that true mysticism requires both transcendence and the return. In most hero journey stories, there's going to be a return. And that means the hero, the protagonist, returns with wisdom to share with the community. That's how it's supposed to go in most mythological and folklore traditions. Even fairy stories at some point has some sort of knowledge that it's trying to impart. Okay? And so Dionysus was, intoxicating. As a matter of fact, the Maenads were women of society who would drink of his potion and go mad with ecstasy and leave all that they knew, and off they went with Dionysus to serve him and to be devoted to him, and that meant their cares, their normal lives were on hold for a while. And so that energy is what we mean. Now we're talking about intoxication, having a permanent intoxication. That intoxication doesn't necessarily have to be a drug, or necessarily, it can be alcohol. It can be anything that's used as an escape. Alcohol can be used as an escape. Sex can be used as an escape. Thinking can be used as an escape. Meditation can be used as an escape. So all mystical, esoteric technologies and intelligences can be used as an escape. So the question is this being used to transcend boundaries that have been outgrown, or is it being used to avoid facing things within and without, above and below? Okay? And so we're thinking about also transcending the shadow through compassionate action. So you can't just, go have the experience, whatever that may look like, and then return with wisdom. That wisdom must be shared, but it also must be embodied. Now you must live it. You had a wonderful, hypothetical person, had a wonderful experience on, let's say, ibogaine or mushrooms, and they thought to themselves, wow, I am attracting the same type of people in my life, and I'm curious about that, because what I want is a supportive network of friends and found family, and I don't seem to be finding that. So what am I missing? What am I not seeing? What is unconscious within me? Those are good questions. But the alternative there would be also to say, I need to take more of this ibogaine, more of these mushrooms, to get that experience, rather than I noticed this painful thing and this painful pattern within me. How am I going to integrate that? How am I going to become more aware of that so that I don't use this experience as an escape or an attempt to transcend reality, which is I want to create one thing and I seem to be getting another. And so when we're looking at the mystic, the drowning mystic, we're looking at that, like I said, it's that energy, it's Dionysus, it's that type of energy of constant intoxication without considering how this wisdom can be lived. because the doing of that is not comfortable. It's not rosy or shiny or pretty. And we can also, like I said, transcend through compassionate action. So the mystic archetype can embrace Kuan Yin's energy, and that's the wisdom of engaged compassion. It's understanding that genuine spiritual realization naturally flows to alleviate suffering, and that is one of its focuses. So liberation is found in mysticism that embraces rather than escapes the world, And so after these transcendent experiences with plant medicines and plant allies, we still have to go back to regular life. And it is not comfortable. Re-entry is not comfortable, and I feel that a lot of these plant ally experiences do not provide enough support, at least not for me, to reintegrate, so that when I return back from the experience, I can deal with the discomfort and regain firm footing as much as is comfortable for me over a period of time, is what I would say. And so we're looking at that type of energy, and you can find examples of that in life. The friend who is, book after book of self-help, course after course. This is going to be the one. This is going to be the course that does it. This is going to be the book that's going to change my life. And then it's like, well, that didn't work. Let's try something else. Let's do another course. Let's take another retreat. Let's go on another retreat. Let's go to another Vipassana retreat, and let's try this again. Let's keep doing this. That type of energy is what I'm talking about. That is the being addicted to the altered state, the highs, because it's wonderful to feel high, to feel happy, to feel joyful, to feel delight and enjoyment. You want all that to last, and you want it to last forever. But the challenge here is that impermanence is a thing. Nervous systems are not meant to be in states of high arousal, and joy, delight, happiness, etc., alongside fear and anger, are arousal states. The only difference between them and fear and anger is that fear and anger is a part of the survival mechanism on the survival, the attachment side, and the more connection side, the survival side being the other side, connection side meaning ecstasy, joy. Well, your needs are taken care of. Your food is in your belly. You're warm. You're safe. Now you can step into connection, and that's where you get the excitement, the joy. But nervous systems are not meant to stay on that side either. They're meant to return to a place of homeostasis. And that state homeostasis can lead us to the illusion that the energy is dead, that it's gone, that it's over, that it may be that what we experienced wasn't true or real at all. No, it's just that nervous systems are meant to calm down. It cannot live in a state of activation. And so the mystic in us and in the people around us might mistake that lack of wow for it's over, it's dead, it's gone, life sucks kind of energy. So if we're going to embody the mystic's wisdom, then we need to create sacred containers for dissolution. So we need practical approaches to establishing spaces where boundaries can safely dissolve without psychological fragmentation, meaning that you don't lose whatever your sense of self, a grounding ability, a grounding state in which you know yourself, as opposed to suddenly kundalini awakenings, risings, ayahuasca, any of these experiences with altered substances. Even if you're doing breath work, it can be disorienting, and it can result in fragmentation. And that's why it is wise to slow down and take a more measured pace when working with spirit, when working with soul. Okay, so Vishnu is a Indian creation deity, and this deity has to do with cosmic waters and universal cycles. And so it shows how dissolution might be balanced with preservation and eventual renewal, meaning things end and then things are reborn. things end and things are reborn. Okay, so we're looking for a place and people, and I would suggest someone with a medical degree who can guide us through these experiences so that we don't have to do them alone, because I definitely do this, especially if someone has PTSD or CPTSD. It's necessary, or any issues with mental health. It's always best to have someone who can walk alongside you and guide you, rather than attempting to work with these types of energies alone. And so support is key. Balancing mystical awareness and embodied presence. So we can honor transcendent experience. It's lovely. That's what some of these experiences are. With plant allies, those are transcendent experiences. They can also be a peak experience, like a run that provides a runner's high, etc. So we can remain effectively engaged with the world, meaning we don't have to float off into space. We can still be here, be in the world, but not necessarily of the world. And so when we're looking at Tiamat's energy, which is the Babylonian primordial goddess, we're talking about the primordial waters from which all things emerge. And so that basically talks about formlessness and form, and they are contemplative rather than opposing forces. So when we're looking at formlessness, from the world of dreams, from the other world, the dream time is what Aboriginal indigenous people in the Australian and thereabouts, how they might describe this energy. And so they're complementary. There are two sides of a coin rather than oppositional forces that are doing a push and a pull on each other. And so we're looking at intuitive wisdom with practical application. So the mystical archetype, it's here to channel boundless compassion and move us toward healing. And that healing is meant to address the spiritual and the material dimensions. You cannot ignore one for the other, otherwise it's going to be very hard to integrate. And so what we do here is we question whether or not spiritual practices serve liberation or merely reinforce subtle forms of separation. So that is the question. And I leave you with that question because I love questions. And I'm going to move on to this thought. As we emerge from the cosmic ocean of Pisces, we carry within us the understanding that true mysticism isn't merely transcending the world, but recognizing that we are the world dreaming itself into being. The mystic's most profound gift is the courage to dissolve artificial boundaries whilst maintaining enough form to be of service. So we are complete as we complete our journey through the Zodiac 12 archetypes. Consider this. Each represents an essential aspect of our whole selves. Until we meet again, question your mystical journeys. Are they truly liberating consciousness or merely creating more subtle forms of separation? Ponder this. Wisdom often arrives in moments of surrender, revealing unity where we once perceived only division. And okay, the Daily Stargazer newsletter, free and paid. Learn more at the link in the show notes. You can find us on YouTube, Instagram, and Pinterest. Those links are also in the show notes. And thank you very much for listening. May your mystical awareness remain grounded in compassionate action as you continue your cosmic journey. I am APM, your intrepid star guide and cosmic detective. Thank you for listening once again, and peace and astro magic, star people.